You're listening to the Downeast Mike podcast, the quirky little podcast from Maine. And now, your host, Downeast Mike.
Dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. Good morning, everybody. This is Downeast Mike, the long missing Downeast Mike, and I want to apologize to my long-term listeners who've been waiting so patiently for a new episode of Downeast Mike to pop up in their feed. And so a long-time friend of the family, Midcoast Michelle, has had a hip replacement, and so Downeast Mike has been taking care of her quite attentively, and just helping her get around the house, and she's staying here for a bit with Frank and Downeast Mike, and so he's tending to that. It's a chief cook and bottle washer, and there's a lot to be done when you're caring for somebody who can't get around on their own, and cooking their eggs just right, and making a Caesar salad, making sure you're putting a sprinkled cheese on, and don't forget the croutons. And it's a lot of labor taking care of somebody that can't get around on their own, but we're muddling through it. And Midcoast Michelle is well on her way back to health. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you for asking, by the way. What kind of animated? This is Downeast Mike, episode number 80, news and commentary for March 18th, 2023. It is Saturday. What a glorious day shaping up ahead of us here in Downeast Maine. Also, Uncle Vance has been working the heck out of me, fixing bait bags, and we were in the boat shed the other day, and he's just kind of looking over the side of the workbench at me, and I could just tell it was like, pick up the pace, Downeast Mike, you're not getting enough bait bags knitted for me. And my old tired fingers can only move so fast. That twine is tough to work with early in the morning. But again, we get through it, don't we? We just muddle our way through. So Downeast Mike, episode 80, we've said that, and we should tell you that some of this is whimsy, some of it's true. The interpretation of it all is entirely up to you. And did you also know that the Downeast Mike podcast contains no mean words? It's just wholesome goodness from Downeast Maine, a historical, literary, auditory candy store. And did you hear the bells on the door as you came in? Frank Norwood dropped by too the other day. It's just been one string of visitors after another. And he was reminding me about the time in Tenants Harbor, and he was riding down the hill on his bike, and he went off the rock at the base of the hill down by the harbor, and he got airborne, and he landed on his head. And the funny thing is that when he landed, he blacked out. But he got up and walked around and talked to everybody like nothing had happened. And he didn't remember it. They was all like, Frank, don't you know that you was blacked out? You hit your head? And he said, no, I was talking, right? Very, very confusing segment. And we wonder sometimes if that impacted him to this day. Let's look at the headlines today going on in the world. If you're just getting up and you wonder what's going on. There's a warrant for Putin, an arrest warrant. I think we already heard that yesterday. There's a man who threatened to kill cops at St. Patrick's Day parade, and he was arrested. That's sad. The Lakers suffer a crushing loss against Dallas in the final seconds. That's basketball, I guess. They're still playing that somewhere. I'm back. Trump returns to YouTube and Facebook after a 2-year ban. I didn't know people still use Facebook, but Trump does apparently. Finland, but not Sweden, is a step closer to joining NATO. There's only 5 million Finnish people? We have a Finn tie-in at Downeast Mike show today. Frozen strawberries sold at Costco and Trader Joe's and Aldi have been recalled after hepatitis A. That's the bad one, right? There's A, B, C, D. You can get a vaccine for all those. The Cure take on Ticketmaster, and the site will offer partial refunds. You know, times have really changed when the lead singer of The Cure looks normal, right? Let's see. Biden says GOP report Hunter and Haley got Chinese money isn't true. All that stuff seems to roll on and on. Let's look at the Maine headlines. Maybe there's something better going on in Maine today. LL Bean has its second best year in its history, probably because people are outside more. And what else in Maine? Just kind of boring stuff. Hundreds gather to honor the kindness of Holden Police Chief Chris Greeley. He passed away suddenly last week at the age of 60. I guess he was very much loved in town there. And I'm looking for Maine headlines, but there's really not a lot going on in the Maine news, so we're not even going to bother any further there. Let's go to our episode today. Midcoast Michelle's hip. We've covered that one already at length. Sugary Maine Wood from this day in 1977. Rockefeller funds education with $50 million in this day in 1907. That's a lot of money. We have train stories, Gagged girls, and Mattawamkeag wrecks from this day in 1907. We have Maine's bi-weekly bird. You don't want to miss that. How about some birthdays? Happy birthday today to Wendell from New Portland. He'll be 60 today. Wendell was in the National Guard. Happy birthday today to Ivan. He's a newcomer to Maine, still processing it all, taking it all in. Welcome, Ivan. Happy 25th birthday. Studying sugar from the wood pulp, two teams of Maine researchers working independently and to some extent unaware of one another. That sounds like somebody we know. They're currently examining the commercial feasibility of xylitol, a remarkable sugar substitute found in abundance in the pulp of trash hardwood trees. Must be like poplar. Was saccharin banned by the FDA for its possible carcinogenic properties. Xylitol may someday in the not-too-distant future be the logical successor. Xylitol is a substance which looks like sugar, tastes like sugar, and has less calories than sugar, and it may someday perhaps be used by diabetics with complete impunity. And I picture a diabetic with a bowl of xylitol in front of them. And unlike sugar, it does not cause cavities and actually protects teeth from decay. If it sounds too good to be true, the rub is that at current production rates it is. In Finland, where xylitol's properties were discovered a few years ago, in which produces half the world's supply, a pound retails for about $2.85. Xylitol. Of course, that's in gum today, and I don't know, maybe some drinks they put it in too. On this day in 1977, Mechanical Problems Beach, the Canadian ferry, they had a 79-foot catamaran, heralded as the first twin-hulled ferry in eastern Canada. It was towed into port, Grand Harbor, New Brunswick, with a broken propeller and a malfunctioning steering system. It's a 6-month-old ferry designed specifically for service between Whitehead and Grand Maine, and it had yet to make a scheduled trip between the two New Brunswick islands off Lubec. In the meantime, residents of Whitehead Island are relying on a 13-year-old passenger boat scow combination to provide connection with Grand Maine 3 miles away. 17 students who have weathered a variety of incidents, including 2 minor groundings last fall, are reportedly anxious for a change. So is Grand Maine High School principal Robin Rowe, who watched the new ferry being towed to Ingalls Head earlier this week. Rowe said Thursday his main difficulty as chief administrator of all Grand Maine and Whitehead schools is that the present ferry seldom has room for automobiles, and you have to have someone pick you up on the other side. On August 25th, 1976, the ferry currently in use, was involved in a near disaster when its scow shifted under the weight of a loaded gravel truck. As the vessel began shipping water near Sam's Ledge, 2 automobiles on the deck became submerged, and the ferry captain had to ground out the scow on Russ Island. In addition to the damaged vehicles, supplies for 2 Whitehead grocery stores were destroyed. The new ferry is designed to carry between 6 and 10 large vehicles. I've ridden on those little scows, and that must have been terrifying to be on there with a gravel loaded down truck. Also on this day, 1977, the tugmen report a body afloat in the Penobscot. A body believed to be that of a Finnish sailor, missing since December 3rd at Winterport, was spotted briefly from a tugboat Thursday in the Penobscot River. U.S. Coast Guard spokesman at Group Southwest Harbor and Environmental Detachment at Bucksport said 3 Holmes Towage Company tugs were bringing a Greek oil tanker under the Waldo Hancock Bridge at about 8:30 a.m. when 1 or 2 crew members saw what looked like a floating body slip under the keel of one of the tugs. Sounds like a horror movie, doesn't it? So some fellows from the Warden Service and Bucksport Police Chief, they led initial river searches in their small motorboats. Then they brought in a 40-foot Coast Guard boat from Rockland, and they searched the river from Fort Knox and the bridge where the channel turns several miles down to Sandy Point and Stockton Springs. They didn't find the body. They're saying if the body was that of a Finnish sailor, it would be Ahiti Hapajarvi, 25, who returned to the Finnish vessel Hang T late on the evening of Friday, December 3rd, 1976. Upon returning, he fell into the river when he slipped on the ice. Friends attempted to save him and threw a life ring on the turbulent, icy water to no avail, and the life ring was found that weekend. The Finnish vessel was loading Maine potatoes at the new Winterport Docks, Inc. Very sad story. Well, you could have gone out on this day, 1977, on Verona Island to the Pirates Cove Lounge, and you could have danced to the sound of Badge, B-A-D-G-E, and that would have been tonight from 9 to 1. We're going to go dancing to Badge. Twin City Motel has a big thank you. We appreciate your tremendous response to our Supper Club Saturday night buffet. And also, by popular demand, Chef Tiny Betts will prepare his grand smorgasbord with beverage and dessert included, $8.50 for 2. Rocky was in the local University Theater in Old Town. Network with William Holden and Faye Dunaway, Peter Finch, Robert Duvall. That's where he said the "I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore" line. Bill Pollard show at the Down Under at Dick Stacy's Plaza Motel and Brewer. And we saw another one here. It was pretty good. Let's see, where was it? Oh yeah, the Red Barn in Monroe, Maine. Friday and Saturday. Oat Willie. ID required. And this was before legal marijuana. A Bangor Singles Club at the Bangor Community Center, Buffalo Creek. We have some really woodsy sounding bands back then. Cliff Defini and Sunrise. I bet they were a cover band. At Miller's Restaurant in Bangor, you could get good food, lots of it, and not a lot of money. Then there's a picture of Miller's front of it. There was a letter to the editor from Paula Merritt, equating then with now to the editor. I can't believe that this Indian claims action has gotten as far as it has. Of course, I am on the side of fairness, but fail to see how the Indians and the Justice Department can equate then with now and act accordingly. The Indians, what are they saying here? That are suing the state at present time are not the Indians who were wrongly deprived of their lands. The reasoning of these people is that you can make up for past history. To me, this is like saying the state should execute me because my great-grandfather was a murderer. We are not responsible for what our ancestors did. How can we be? To the extent that we can control the past, should we be responsible for it? And what kind of illogical reasoning are we seeing when we assume that the organized Indians are the only ones wronged by history? How are we to tell if we are not to some extent a descendant of the Indian tribes referred to, especially if we're Maine residents? That was Paula Merritt. She was quite upset in 1977. We found some Dear Abby letters. We thought they were kind of interesting, let's say. Talking about, after advising that an 8-year-old child should not be left alone for 3 hours after school, at 8, my daughter not only stayed alone, she started dinner. At 10, she could prepare any meal as well as I could. At 12, she was learning to make her own clothes. Society today is plagued with irresponsible youths who are coddled until they're 16, after which someone tries to teach them responsibility. The result, many healthy young adults that are on welfare. Of course, there is a risk in leaving a child alone, but then again, when we send our children to school, they can be picked up, kidnapped, or even murdered in broad daylight. But we don't quit sending them, do we? If this 8-year-old has been properly taught, and if mom calls regularly to check on her, she'll be safe and responsible. And when the time comes when she has to handle a situation and mama's not there, she'll be prepared. Change your mind, Abby. And then Dear Abby says, I applaud your efforts to teach your child responsibly and wish all parents would follow your fine example. But unfortunately, you are the exception, not the rule. Most 8-year-olds without supervision are not as safe as your lucky youngster. Different times then, and not that long ago, right? Dear Abby, my dad takes a bath at least 3 times a week, but not alone. He takes my TV into the bathroom with him. I've tried reasoning with him, but it doesn't work. I'd like to cuss him out, but since I'm only 13 years old, that wouldn't be a good idea. Dear old dad is not a dumb man, but he just won't quit taking my TV, and my mom says she won't get involved. Can you think of an approach that would help? Steamed daughter. Dear Steamed, ask Pop to pop for a mini TV and a suggestion on how you can earn it for him. P.S. And respectfully tell him not to touch the TV while he's in the tub, or he could get the shock of his life. Abby gave some great advice, didn't she? Here's one more here we got to read. Dear Abby, would you please say a few words in defense of us wives who are constantly being accused of murdering our husbands by feeding them fattening foods? My husband is overweight, and I'm sick and tired of having people tell me it's my fault and that I should watch him. I serve well-balanced meals and try to keep the calories down. I never make rich desserts. I give him fruit instead, but he raids the refrigerator every night. He took up golf, but he rides around in a golf cart eating candy bars. So a lot of good golfing does him, and after dinner he goes out to buy a paper and he stops for a hot fudge sundae. So how can I help him, Abby? Signed, a fool's wife. Dear wife, I could say a few words in your defense, but it won't help your husband. The only one who can help him is the one who does his eating. Back then, if I'd been around, I would have written Dear Abby some letters. On this day, 1907, Rockefeller gave $50 million for education. This is a story out of New York. He intends to give $50 million to the city of New York for charitable and educational purposes. This man, a member of John D. Rockefeller's Bible class, who is in a position to know, was discussing the situation with his son, and I guess his son was in a position to know. It was not the subject of Mr. Rockefeller's will, which the oil king was then completing with the aid of his son and his lawyers. It had said This document will astonish the world when it's made public. It will be declared that he will donate $50 million for charitable and educational purposes, and it will be bestowed that the benefit thereupon will become almost perpetual. I guess it will. $50 million in 1907. He believes education will make this country the greatest in the world, and that every cent contributed toward that object will make a better citizens and better Christians. As to the charitable bequest, it was said some time ago that Mr. Rockefeller had in mind building model tenements for the poor, such as have been erected in some European cities. I wonder what his vision was, his total vision. It's said that scarcely a man, woman, or child that will not benefit in some way by these prospective donations. That's really something. We had a story out of Bath, and this was 1907. Mr. Ace Perry of Cox Island gathered a peck basket full of brown-tail moss from his apple trees last week. Quick action will have to be taken to save the trees of any orchard, as everyone finds brown-tail nests in equal proportions, and of course those are around today harassing us. Chief of Police Hudson of Chelsea, Mass. Instituted a crusade against hoodlumism Saturday night. Easy for me to say. And as a result, it's believed that more than 100 youths will appear in the Chelsea court next Friday. For some time past, there have been numerous complaints of boys who should be at home during the evening, and when the officers on certain routes left the station house Saturday night, they were instructed to get the names of youths who were found disturbing the peace. 100 youths disturbing the peace. Passengers on the 713 train out of Boston Saturday evening are probably wondering what struck the crowd of pretty girls which kept the train crew in miserable suspense all the way to South Braintree, and the occupants of their car surprised and bewildered. The girls were first noticed when they entered the South Terminal in Boston. There were just 23, a significant number, and 3 of them occupied the center of a human ring composed of the other 20. The 3 girls in the center had gags in their mouths and wore automobile veils, and they were pushed and pulled along by their companions, who took pains to let the public know that something unusual was on the menu. By the time the group of girls got to the train, they were followed by a large crowd of men and boys, and all sorts of suggestions were offered as an explanation. Once on the train, the 3 girls were given their freedom of speech, and the questions with which they plied the train crew kept the other passengers in a roar. Despite the fact that the questioners were as pretty as could be, the trainmen were not long in finding out that they were being made game of, and the answers soon came with bad grace, much to the enjoyment of the 20 escorts and the other passengers in the car. It was the initiation of 3 girls from a certain well-known educational institution of Boston. So it was a hazing incident. A long way of saying it. We have a story this is from Bates College. Junior girls of Bates College entertained several members of the class in the girls' gym Saturday evening. The light, spacious gym was made attractive by screens, rugs, tea tables, and potted palms, and profusely decorated with Bates banners. The good old-fashioned games of Tucker, 7 in and out, grocery store, and pummel were enjoyed with the zest of 7-year-olds. The fearful concoctions of soap, celery, etc. in the grocery store game and the laughing game caused much merriment. Guy Williams was the successful competitor in the blindfold candy hunt. The boys evinced some slight show of interest in the cooking arrangements going on at the various tables, and Captain Schumacher was discovered beating eggs as carefully intent upon the task as if it had been the planning of a football campaign. The supper cards were rather clever little affairs, having directions in rhyme for the search of some little college, I can't read that word, some college from chafing dishes to athletic regalia. Miss Knox and Miss Little served Welsh rabbit, Miss Jones shrimp wiggy, Miss Melcher and Miss Wentford Mexican rabbit, and Miss Packard creamed salmon. It's just awful. After supper, the company adjourned to the galleries where they sang college songs until preparations were made for a photograph which was taken in the gym. The party broke up with an especially awe-inspiring 1908 yell and the customary vocal tribute of "Good Night, Ladies." And that was at Bates' party at Milliken House, a meeting of the YWCA. Well, you could have bought a farm for $1,000 on this day in the Auburn area. A farm with 50 acres, plenty of wood for fire, 100 apple trees, a fair set of buildings, 6 miles from the city of Auburn, has good, strong soil. It's a farm with 250 acres, another 100 acres of woodland, and you cut about 75 tons of hay. 400 apple trees, a good bargain on that one as well. Then you could buy a modern cottage house. They didn't give a price on the cottage house. Cheap real estate. What else do we have here? Bad train wreck in Mattawamkeag in March 18th. Of course, we had a terrific one there a few years back, and this is in 1907. 2 passenger trains on the Canadian Pacific Railway were in a collision at the local yard today. No one was killed. It was reported that no one was injured beyond a severe shaking. I guess so. The train left Halifax last night and arrived here at 6:30 in the morning and sidetracked a train of empty cars used to haul immigrants and bound to St. John. It was expected traffic on the Canadian Pacific and Maine Central Railroads would be blocked all day. They note 3 of the empty coaches were wrecked, as was the engine and baggage car. And then they have a side note. The wreckage caught fire from the engine, and 1 or 2 coaches and the engine were burning. The engine crew escaped by jumping. You could just picture that. As there are a score of freight trains running daily on this line, the blockage is a serious one. We had a letter to the editor. Town meeting's over and nothing now to excite any interest for Reedfield people except 4th of July. Town meeting is really the first sniff of spring that country folks get. After that, spring and summer come along without a hitch. Farmers are knotted together on every corner, talking over the most profitable crops to be raised, where the best seed potatoes can be found, and how many hens the women folks are going to set. There's a wonder more hens are not kept by the average farmer with eggs from 20 cents to 45 cents a dozen. There are so many strings for the farmer to pull from all that cannot fail. Sheep seem to be a thing of the past in farming localities, but there is a big profit from them in wool and lambs. Of course, cows are a standby, and when one sees a good herd of dairy cows with a well-filled grain bin and an ice house in the rear, there's no need to ask if cows pay. For well-kept, comfortable, or luxurious farm buildings answer the question before it's asked. We are progressing along every line, and farmers must progress too or be content with a back seat for themselves and their families. This is the letter to the editor from 1907. They must get out of the rut and drop the old-time methods. There are so many shiftless farmers, content to live from hand to mouth in buildings dropping down over their heads, dragging their children down until they're old enough to rebel and start out in the world denouncing the farm. It's a perfect hatred for farm life, and who is to blame if old people are left on the farm alone? We must not expect our children to be contented with what pleased us when we were children. We brought them forth at a different age, and they must have the pleasures and beauties of today to please. The time was when a 4-minute horse trot would fill the bill. Our children know nothing of that. They demand the 2:10 clip. It is so in everything. We are passed by in the 4-minute gait everywhere and are bringing up the young people in the 2:10 age. Their city friends have a telephone, and they want the things that the day calls for in the age they are living in, not as their ancestors lived. Farmers must wake up to this fact and remember these words. Whosoever provideth not for his own household has denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. That was from GD, a letter to the editor. Well, it is time for Maine's bi-weekly bird. And we noticed this when we were out walking the little doggy the other morning. We heard that first sign of spring that we haven't heard for a long time. It was the little birdie, 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 birdie. It was the cardinal in the tree out front, in the cherry tree. Early in the morning, starting to sing before the sun is up, and tells us that spring is truly right around the corner. These birds are the colorful members of the finch family. The male is well known for his bright red coat, of course, the cardinal, and the female has tinges of red on her fine brownish feathers. At 8 to 9 inches, they sport a distinctive tuft atop their heads. I like when they turn their little head to look at you. They're primarily seed eaters, and they often show up at bird feeders, especially in the winter, but we don't hear them singing in the tree until it's spring. So the northern cardinal is now a common species across the state of Maine, especially the southern and coastal half, but this is a fairly recent phenomenon. Ralph Palmer wrote in his 1949 book of Maine birds that the then eastern cardinal was probably a very rare visitant, most records referring to escaped captives. Soon after, cardinals began expanding their range northward, and only 20 years after Palmer's publication, the first northern cardinal was confirmed breeding in Maine. It lives in developed suburban areas of the state and continues to expand northward. In the first atlas, breeding was confined north to Bangor and west of Farmington. During 2018, confirmed nesting records expanded east to Lubec and north to Presque Isle. What else do we have on the cardinal here? It's widespread and abundant today. Woodland edges, thickets, suburban gardens, towns. Of course, you see them everywhere. It forages mostly while hopping on the ground or in low bushes, sometimes higher in trees. It readily comes to bird feeders where it favors sunflower seeds. And they can go through a bag of sunflower seeds pretty quick. They lay 3 to 4 eggs, whitish to pale bluish or greenish white. Incubation is almost always by female alone, 12 to 13 days. Both parents feed nestlings. The young leave the nest after 9 to 11 days after hatching. The male may feed the fledglings while the female begins next nesting attempt. They'll do 2 to 3 broods per year, rarely 4. As noted, they eat mostly seeds, but they'll eat insects and berries as well. They'll eat grasshoppers and caterpillars, centipedes and snails. Note on nesting, the male sings to defend nesting territory, actively attacking and intruding males, and he will attack his own reflection in windows and mirrors. In courtship, the male and female raise their heads high, sway back and forth while singing softly, and the male often feeds the female early in the breeding season. Well, that's a nice little note. We're going to leave on that except for the weather forecast, which is for today. It's currently 36 degrees, so a little cold start here in Downeast Maine. But for today, patchy fog before 8 a.m., otherwise cloudy through mid-morning, then gradually clearing with a high near 48. And for Sunday, partly sunny, a little bit cooler with a high near 33, west wind up to 50, gusting as high as 30 miles per hour. So you'll feel that breeze for sure. Looking out through next week, Monday is going to be sunny with a high near 41. And then Tuesday looks like a pick of the week. It's sunny and a high of 47. So spring's right around the corner, folks, and we've got to get our spirits up about that. Maybe the snow will finally go away here in Downeast Maine. And until next time, this is Downeast Mike, wishing you and your loved ones a day that is full of grace, love, and kindness. We'll see you. gonna sell all my stunts, 'cause this stuff ain't gonna last. I'm feeling hard just like the banks. Somebody better prop me up, 'cause I'm gonna tank. I've got a 401k. I'm watching it melt away, 'cause I've got a few years to go before I can cash it in. In the mirror there's a fool, a working corporate tool, clinging hard to hope. His nickname is the Mule. I'm feeling hard just like a bank. Somebody better shore me up, 'cause I'm gonna tank. I'm feeling hard, just like a bank. Somebody better shore me up, 'cause I'm gonna take. In a faraway land, there's a manicured hand attached to a body with no heart. But it did the right thing, sold